comes the story of the hurricane. The man the authorities came to blame for something that he never done. Put in a prison cell for one time he could have been the champion of the world. Everybody's lying there, there's Patty C. And another man named Bella moving around mysteriously. I didn't do it, he says, he holds up his hands. I was only running the register, I hope you understand. I saw him leaving, he says, and he stops. One of us had better call up the cops. And so Patty calls the cops. And they arrive on the scene with their red lights flashing in a hot New Jersey night. Meanwhile, far away in another part of town, Ruben Carter and some friends out driving around. The number one contender for the middleweight crown had no idea what kind of shit was about to go down. When the cops pull him over to the side of the road, just like the time before and time before that. In Patterson, that's just the way things go. If you're black, you might as well not show up on the street unless you wanna draw the heat. Ghettos and flames. Ruben in South America fighting for his name. On the next and Bradley still in the robbery game. The cops are putting the screws to him, looking for someone to blame. Remember the murder that you happened in a bar. Remember you said you saw the getaway car. How'd you like to play ball with the law? Think it might have been that fighter running that night. Don't forget that you were white. Bradley said, I'm really not sure. Cop said, a poor boy like you could use that break. We got you for the motel job and we're talking to your friend Bello. You don't want to have to go back to jail, be a nice fellow. You'll be doing society a favor. That son of a bitch is brave and getting braver. We want to put his ass in the stir. We want to pin this triple murder on him. He ain't no gentleman. He never stood a chance. The judge made Ruben's witnesses drunkards from the slums. To the white folks, he was just a revolutionary bomb. To the black folks, he was just a crazy nigger. And no one doubted that he pulled the trigger. So they could not produce the gun. The DA said he was the one who did the deed, and they always jury agreed. And their coats and their ties are free to drink martinis and watch the sunrise, while Ruben sits like Buddha in a 10-foot cell, an innocent man in a living hell. Yes, that's the story of the hurricane, but it won't be over till they clear his name. Give him back the time he's done. Put in a prison cell for one time he could have been the champion of the world.
I'm Emmett Abati Doe. And what you're about to see next is the gala event held at the United Nations for the movie The Hurricane. The Hurricane is the true story of Ruben Hurricane Carter, the man who was the #1 middleweight contender for the championship of the world, whose career and life was snatched from him by criminals in uniform and robes. Ruben Hurricane Carter, who found himself accused of killing innocent people he didn't know, nor could he have done what the state of New Jersey framed him for. The world saw in the screening of the movie Hurricane that the criminal justice system in America is broke. Next, the hurricane at the United Nations. I'm Emmett Abati Doe.
Just want to make sure he gets all lined up. So, how's it feel to be here tonight in the UN?
Wow.
With your story.
That's incredible. That's incredible. But you know, I'm on a book tour right now at the same time as we're doing this movie stuff. And my editor or my writer, Jim Hurst, made a comment when I said, well, we're on a book tour. He said, no, Ruben, we're not on a book tour or a movie tour. He said, we're on a victory tour, ending up at the United Nations where you are vindicated throughout the whole world. And that's an incredible way to see this. And we are beginning to see this as exactly that.
That's great. Hey, I'm going to take you back a little bit. Just tell me what it was like. You had given up. You had been...
Never given up, my brother.
Let up, you'd thrown all your law books away. You went
Oh,
into this
yeah.
whole sort of solitary thing where you said, forget it. My wife, forget it. My daughter, forget it. And you sat there. What brought you out of that?
I didn't sit there because once we were reconvicted after 10 years of prison, and I realized that the law can no longer help me. It was the law itself that was criminal. It was the law that put me in here. So I had to search for something beyond the law, something that was above the law, something that could control the law. And in trying to search for that which can control the law, trying to escape prison, I stumbled upon the universal prison, the prison where all of us are in prison. And when I understood that if I am able to escape the universal prison, this little prison of brick and stone and mortar will disappear. And it did disappear. I'm standing here in the United Nations tonight talking to you, not in Trenton State Prison. It is miraculous.
I've got one more for you. Did you ever think it was going to be Denzel Washington to portray you?
Oh, yes. I mean, Denzel Washington was the one that we began writing the script for, as well as Marlon Brando. We wanted Marlon Brando to play Della Pasco. And Marlon Brando, I've talked to Marlon Brando about it, and he wanted it. But it was so many years that it took to make the picture, till by the time we were ready, everybody was ready. Norman was ready, Denzel was ready, everybody was ready, but Marlon Brando. He wasn't ready. Yeah.
Now tell me one more thing. It's Lesra. Lesra, why did you put all your face in Lesra? Here was a boy that wrote you a letter, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Where did he come from? Or out of the blue, why did you trust him? All these people,
I trusted him because by that time, I had been well into my work. And a lot of things had begun to open up for me. A lot of things. And when Lesra wrote that little letter, having no understanding that this child will be the catalyst upon which my freedom would come. But the fact that I was introduced into magic as I began searching for myself, searching for that something higher than law.
It just kicked in.
It just kicked in. That's the magic. When you change, everything about you would change because everything is connected together. And a change in one place will automatically produce a change in another place. So when there's change, there's change. It's rolling. And this is what's happening now. We are rolling.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
On that tour.
Yes, thank you.
It is a heavy story.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ruben Hurricane Carter.
Well, as in all biblical scriptures, it always say the first is last and the last is first. So first I want to introduce again my hero, John Artis. John.
Whoa. Wow. Wow. This is, gosh, thanks, Ruben. Christ, this is, okay, all right, let me read you something since you want to, you know. This is for you, Ruben, and someone handed this to me. This is from the greatest heavyweight of them all, the greatest people champion that ever existed. And this is from the man, Muhammad Ali. And it says, "Dear friends, for more than 25 years, I have been proud to call Ruben Hurricane Carter my friend. I have always had tremendous respect for him, for his great personal strength, his bravery, and his fortitude in bearing extreme injustice. Perhaps it is his faith in God that has helped him persevere, for I know that Hurricane is a deeply spiritual man. It is incredibly sad that it took our legal system 22 years to figure out what those who know Hurricane have always known. He is and always has been an innocent man. There is perhaps no greater hardship than being accused of a crime one didn't commit. And sadly, justice is not always served in our criminal justice system, so we must always fight for who and what we believe in. I have always believed in Hurricane, and I am glad that with the release of this film, more people will learn about his story and be inspired by his tremendous courage, and it says, sincerely, Muhammad Ali." Now, I can't be sentimental here. I was told to make this short. Not. I never say anything, or I never get an opportunity to say very much, so I'm going to steal some time here, hopefully. Yeah. This film, this whole saga of my life, I'm tired of talking about Ruben Carter. I grew up as a youth. I witnessed a lot in my short 53 years on this earth. I grew up with racial division in the South. I was sad to hear that Virginia is executing another person tonight, especially a youth that has passed through the facility that I work in. I've watched men go to the moon. I've transcended a new millennium, and I've even faced the justice system when they conspired to murder me and do it illegally and unjustly. ultimately to come here to the UN and be standing on a podium in the United Nations. I think that's a remarkable journey to have traveled. But here I am. Here we are. And as I can't continue to watch this film and I think about everything that's occurred, I think I don't look at the end. The end is just a culmination of a lot of work and concern by some really great people. And the very first that comes to my mind is a guy named Freddie Hogan, who in the 1970s walked in the raw way and said, "This stinks. Something should be done about this, and I don't believe this, and I'm going to do something about it." And in turn, he got a bunch of other guys, Stanley Vaness and Jack Noonan and John Fleming and a bunch of other people who got involved. And then law firms, and then college students, and Rutgers, and then Mike Beldock, and then my great friend Louis Steele, and ultimately the Canadians all got involved and that's what it took to bring up all of the evidence and all of the truths to the surface so that everyone would know exactly what occurred. And for them having done that, it enabled me to be here today, that I'm alive. I'm extremely, extremely grateful. I can't tell you how grateful I am to be alive. It's a miracle that Ruben Carter and I are here today alive. I had a deal made to me. And the deal was simply this: sacrifice Ruben Carter and you can go free. All you have to do is simply say, Ruben Carter was the assailant and you were there or knew about it, and we'll let you go free. And although I was a child, I was a kid, I was 19 years old. I had no knowledge of the criminal element, the hard side of life, or any of that. I was a ball player. I was a track star. I just wanted to go to school, play ball, and do something good, make my parents proud of me, make some money, and ultimately retire in coaching. But this test, there's an old saying that experience is a difficult taskmaster. It tests you first and teaches you later. I found out at 19 that I had integrity and that I had moral value of character. And those things I learned from my parents. So therefore, I couldn't compromise that in order to become a conspirator to kill or lock Ruben up for the rest of his life. Can't do it, never will do it. And now I find myself today, Ruben does Adwick and I do Creating Youth Awareness. And what I try to do is be the roadblock between all these youth who are in the streets and about to become food for the judicial system, where in 1975, New Jersey changed their laws to incarcerate a kid when he was 14. Virginia has lowered their laws down to the state that there's no more parole, and kids who commit a crime at the age of 14 will be tried as an adult. Unfortunately, I've had several pass through me where I couldn't do very much about it. But I'm going to stay out there at the grassroots level and to continue to interact with these kids and show them that there's a different horizon. I don't know prison from an adult standpoint of view. I only know it from a kid's point of view because I was a kid when I got there. Sometimes I think I'm still a kid. But the help that, like, it started with Freddie. One person had a thought, got some other people involved. I'm by myself, so to speak, right now, Virginia, trying to do it from my level. And eventually somebody else is going to come give me a hand, like Jack Noonan and those guys came to give Freddie a hand, and like Mike and Louis and all the other people came to give a hand, to save a life, to sacrifice. I know what sacrifice is. And that before I ever sacrifice another human being, no matter what their level of life is, no matter what. My father used to always say, no matter how bad you got it, somebody's got it worse. So therefore, I just got to stay out here on the front line and still save people, I guess. And do what I can. Jesus. And I just like to thank, hey Fred, I'm glad you showed up that day, man. Really. But I'm just one little segment. Ruben calls me his hero. Okay, I kept him alive. But there were some others that came that got him here. And this next guy, the guy that wrote this letter, fortunately I could write a little bit, but I never talked. I'm doing more talking now than I've ever done in my life. I'm glad you couldn't. Really? But I'd like to introduce Lesra, the other guy who had a part in being a part of Ruben Carter being here.
You weren't supposed to do this to me, Jared. Wow. Forgive me. I could have never imagined, that the first book that I ever read would land me at the United Nations. It's truly incredible when you think about it. It is indeed, in my opinion, a triumph today. Today, in my estimation, is indeed a day for literacy, for the power of the written word, for the power of all that Ruben Carter stands for, all that John Artis stands for. And it's also today representing the power of the access to opportunity. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. It's fitting, you see, that we have come full circle, that we find ourselves here tonight in my hometown. As I stand here, I am reminded of the very day that strangers came to my parents' apartment and asked if they could take their son away. I can still vividly remember, in my mind's eye, the anguished expression on my mother's face. I remember how difficult a decision it was for her, how difficult she found the thought of allowing her son to be taken away from her. She jumped up immediately from her seat on the couch. And she said, I can't do this. Earl, my father, you have to make that decision. So, to Canada, my father went to check things out, to make sure everything was as it sounded. And when he returned, he said simply one word to me. Well, okay, he said. Okay, you can go if you want. And I tell you, I often wonder, had they not allowed me to go, would we be here tonight? I don't know. Would Ruben be sitting here tonight? Would John be sitting here tonight? I don't know. That close. I don't know. I am particularly pleased to have with me here tonight, not just John and Ruben, but also my immediate family. I have some members of my family, and please welcome them. Can you stand up for me over there, please? I say with pride that my family supported me through this whole process. None of the things that you would expect was there. Nothing like, oh, why you and not me? They protected me all the time from all the bad things that go on. They kept me focused it is that I had to learn. But you know, I have to tell you, on my flight here to New York, I reflected long and hard on that very day that my mother had a big decision to make. One that, to some extent, was a catalyst in this whole thing. I could not conceive on the flight here one act that was more selfless than a parent giving up a child. I couldn't do it, even when it was a better opportunity. I don't think I could have done it. This is, as far as I know it, the land of opportunity where I stand. Make no mistake about that, few would. But you know, what my parents had to do, they should not, in my opinion, ever had to even conceive of doing such a thing. They should not had to have been so brave, so heroic. It should not have been part of the opportunities, so-called opportunities, that they had before them. There is no reason, in my opinion, that a mother, a citizen of the world's mightiest nation, should ever have to even think about, for one moment, giving up a child in order to provide it with a proper education, not in the world's mightiest nation. It's a sad day to me when a 15-year-old child has no chance but to leave his birth country in order to have meaningful access to opportunity. It's a sad day when that child has to say goodbye to his brothers and sisters. Saddest of all, there is absolutely no excuse for it. And you couldn't provide me with one. The resources were right here where I stand. They were not available to me. There is no excuse for that. Have you gathered by now that I'm a tad bit perturbed tonight? I came here because I think I need your help. You see, a war is going on right now as we in our own backyard. And in case you haven't figured it out by now, let me set it straight. I came here tonight ready to fight. And with all due respect to my Papa Daddy, it's not a prize fight. I'm taking the gloves off because it's a street fight. It's a fight that I and all of us sitting in this room have to win. Because if we don't, it's going to be a sad day tomorrow. There's simply, as far as I can tell, too much at stake. Are we so developed in this society that we can afford to let millions of minds go undeveloped right here in our own backyard in the world's most developed nation? I don't think so. I'm sorry, I just don't. I think not. How do we know that languishing in ghetto communities right here or in small rural communities where there's very little access to opportunity, how do we know that in those communities there isn't a mind with a little nourishment, with a little love, a little compassion, a little help is going to help all of us get through the next century? How do we know that that mind isn't there? We cannot afford to make that mistake, not going into a new millennium. We've got ourselves into this mess, and we've got to get ourselves out of it. I'm urging you tonight to let the messages of this movie spur you on to fight a good fight. Don't turn away from it. You heard that in the movie. Don't do that. And each of us, I am absolutely convinced that there is the strength the power to make a difference. I have now, ladies and gentlemen, the real pleasure of introducing to you the embodiment of the power of one, Papa Daddy himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ruben Hurricane Carter.
Finally, the youngsters have sat down. Your Excellencies, distinguished dignitaries, honorable members of these United Nations, honored guests, and friends. My name is Ruben Carter. Sometimes in the West, they call me Mariah, but in the East, they call me the Hurricane. And I am a survivor. I am a survivor. A survivor of the American judicial system in the same way as those who survived the awful Holocaust in Nazi Germany, surviving within the very death camps where millions upon millions of people were being slaughtered every single day. I am a survivor in the very same way. Except, of course, in Germany, murdered and jailed because of their religion. But here in the United States, it's because of the skin. I am also the executive director of AIDWIC, the International Association in Defense of the Wrongly Convicted. And it is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to appear at this prestigious forum today. These are exciting times for me personally. What we have just witnessed is a superb new motion picture about my life, starring Denzel Washington. It is truly humbling to have such a famous, good-looking actor portray you up on the big screen. Up until I saw Denzel portray me on the screen, I really didn't know how good-looking I was. I really didn't. When I walk down the street now, people come up to me and say, "You don't look like Denzel Washington." I am also pleased to have a new book about my life recently published titled Hurricane, The Miraculous Journey of Ruben Carter. Why miraculous? Let me put it this way. For 20 years, I was incarcerated as a racist triple murderer, condemned by history, repudiated by the courts, and sentenced to die amid the squalor and despair, humiliation of a maximum security prison. But just last month, on December the 3rd, I was invited to the White House for a special screening for the very picture we've just seen. And for more than 2.5 hours, I sat in a dark room next to the President of the United States. The most influential human being on this planet Earth, engaging him in serious conversation about critical issues, so close I could hear every breath he took. And today, tonight, I am standing here at the United Nations making this address. Now, if that's not miraculous, then I don't know what is. I don't know what is. But while these are exciting times for me personally, they are not very good times for many others. I regret to inform you that the very rights upon which I based my own campaign for freedom are today being undermined. Under current law today, I probably would have never gotten out of prison because federal courts face significant new restrictions in reviewing state court procedures, restrictions that would have hurt my own appeal irreparably. Evidence of my innocence may never have gone to federal court, and I would have been left to die in prison, condemned to history as a triple racist murderer. Now, at the same time, capital punishment has become so commonplace in this country today that state-sponsored executions are no longer considered even newsworthy. I realize that the United Nations is concerned about universal human rights, the rights of every man, woman, and child across the globe, regardless of race, regardless of creed, or regardless of nationality. That is indeed a noble task, my friends. And that is why I want to make sure that you understand exactly what is going on in this country today. All civilizations throughout the world strive to establish a boundary between itself and barbarism, because the manifestations of barbarism are usually called crimes. But existing criminology today is too insufficient to isolate barbarism, because it is insufficient because even the idea of crime in existing criminology is much too artificial. For what is called crime today is merely an infringement of existing laws, whereas the law itself may very well be criminal. There are many, many people who find themselves in prison today standing on the wrong side of the law, not because they went astray, but because the law, having been placed in the wrong hands, strayed from the right path. And that is why you have Mumia Abu-Jamal sitting up there in Western Pennsylvania on death row today. That is why you have Odell Barnes Jr. on death row in Huntsville today, to be executed. In existing criminology, there are indeed concepts, criminal concepts, a criminal person, a criminal society, and even a criminal tribe. But there is no concept of a criminal state or criminal government or criminal legislation. And therefore, the biggest crimes of all actually escape being called crimes. But it is absolutely criminal for anyone born and raised in this country to be illiterate. It is absolutely criminal for anyone in this country to be homeless. It is criminal for anyone in this country to be narcotized into passivity. It is criminal that there are more young black men in this country in prison than there are in its universities. It is criminal. It is criminal. It is criminal that people in this country are made to live in abject poverty while living in the wealthiest country in the world. And it is absolutely criminal that the writ of habeas corpus, the one life-affirming jewel in the crown of thorns we know as the criminal justice system, is being threatened with extinction. And at the same time, in the name of law and order, capital punishment has turned most of our prisons into assembly lines of death. Between 1977 and 1997, 432 state-sponsored executions were carried out. But even that wasn't enough. This year alone, we will see more than 100. I am not unfamiliar with the death penalty. The state of New Jersey attempted to execute me in 1967. Fortunately, it failed, as jurors rejected the state's request for death and granted me a triple life sentence instead. I know full well that most of the people in prison are actually guilty of crime and convicted. Whenever a prisoner told me that he was innocent, I used to tell him, if you're not guilty, then prove it. Act like it, which is very difficult for anyone to do. But I can also assure you, Your Excellencies, that I was not the only innocent prisoner. And now with U.S. prison and jail populations exceeding 1.8 million, last year, an average of 1,151 new prisoners entered the prison system each week. The need, therefore, to protect innocent people from wrongful convictions is greater than before. That's just common sense. But instead of shoring up these protections, the government is tearing them down, even to the extent of executing citizens of other countries, shades of Joseph Stanley Falder, the Canadian citizen who was executed on June 17, 1966, by the state of Texas and by Governor George W. Bush, Jr. 4 years ago, Congress passed a law that imposed a one-year statute of limitations on the filing of habeas corpus petitions. If you're in prison, as you well know, John, 1 year is nothing. It can take all of a year just to get your lawyer to return your letter. That is, assuming you still have enough money to afford a lawyer, which you probably don't. After my second trial, it took my lawyers almost 2 full years before they can even get their hands on the trial transcript. That this 1 year limit has been applied to habeas corpus is galling. The writ of habeas, also known as the Great Writ, dates back to the Magna Carta and is the concrete right of every man, woman, and child in this country. It is our birthright to be free from arbitrary, capricious, unjust, unconstitutional judgment, conviction, or execution. And now, and also allows, in the United States, allows a federal judge to overturn a criminal conviction by a state court on constitutional grounds. So sacred is this concept that in 1868, the United States Supreme Court called the Great Writ the best and only sufficient defense of personal freedom. Actually, the 1 year cutoff may not be the worst part of the new act. The new law also restricts reviews of cases in which state court decisions involve an unreasonable application of federal law. Even before the new law, federal judges, in deference to state court decisions, rarely granted writs. In 1985, the year I was released, 8,500 petitions were filed, but only about 3% of those petitions were granted writs. But now, the bar has been raised even higher. The U.S. Supreme Court still has to define unreasonableness, but if the High Court follows the narrow interpretations of several conservative circuit courts, it would be all but impossible for a defendant to get habeas corpus relief, and that is indeed criminal. In my own case, Federal District Court Judge H. Lee Sarakin, applying the then applicable law, overturned the verdict, ruling that my conviction was predicated upon an appeal to racism rather than reason, and concealment rather than disclosure. But under the more stringent standard of unreasonableness, it would definitely have been much more difficult, if not even impossible, for Judge Serin to have made his ruling and to have that ruling upheld by higher courts. And yet, the only thing unreasonable about our case at all was the fact that we was trapped in the state of New Jersey for almost 20 years before we filed corpus in the federal court for a crime that we did not, could not, and would not have committed. Why have barriers been created for habeas petitions? Because the petitions themselves are received by politicians as a stall tactic for carrying out death penalties. The very name of the 1996 law, the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, bespeaks its motives. While executions themselves aren't an eyebrow anymore, if an execution is delayed, watch out. All hell breaks loose. Politicians figure they have nothing to lose by assuring voters of swift executions, and death row people the necessary resources they need to fight for their lives. In 1985, Congress wiped out the $20 million annual budget for post-conviction defender organizations, which alone provide counsel to death row prisoners. But these are the people, my friends. These are the very ones who need our help. I could have been one of them myself. Most of us do not have money enough to pay for effective counsel, and death sentences are mistakenly issued more than anyone would care to admit. According to the National Institute of Justice, between 1977 and 1997, more than 2,000 prisoners all across this nation were removed from death rows due to sentencing, errors made by the court, DNA evidence, retrials, or for other reasons. 2,000 people. How many more were not so lucky? The problem with capital punishment is not only the irreversibility of the punishment itself, but also the fallibility of the accusers. In my own case, I never did know why the jury in 1977 rejected the state's request for death, although I'm glad. If an all-white jury truly believed that 2 black men had gunned down 4 innocent white victims in a bar as we were charged, surely those people would have fried. Surely those black people would have been burnt to a bacon rind. There's not that much compassion in the world, much less in a courtroom. Perhaps they let me live because of doubts about my guilt. I don't know. But this much I do know. The prospect of going to the electric chair for a crime you did not commit focuses your attention on the shortcoming of capital punishment. That is, it focuses your attention on the shortcomings of the law seeking the perfect punishment, which is death, coming from an imperfect system. Capital punishment is a crime against humanity. That crime against life itself. And when a society is either unwilling or unable to treat all of its citizens equally with dignity and respect, then it's time for the United Nations to step into the situation and find a peaceful solution. In fact, the United Nations should renew its earlier failed resolution and declare a universal moratorium on the death penalty forever. Forever. Or until such time as the United Nations create a United Nations Youth Congress to be installed in these United Nations to debate these issues which can very well determine the lives of future generations. The aging truths of the majority have sat on the shelves of our lack of conscience for 400 years, like ancient rancid bacon or rotten green ham. And from them, these aging truths, comes all the moral scurvy that is eating into the lives of the people around us. As the members of this esteemed organization know, miscarriages of justice occur throughout the world, and not just in the United States. And the United Nations should be a clarion voice for compassion, a clarion voice for fairness and understanding wherever your work may take you. Thankfully, my own experience in prison taught me something very important about human nature and about life itself. Something that I think is relevant to this honorable body's task of promoting peace and goodwill throughout the world community. Solitary confinement, as I was locked away for years upon years, 6 feet under the ground in total darkness, no sanitary conditions, no lights, no running water, 5 slices of bread and 1 cup of water a day. If you're lucky, you will begin to realize that there are no such things as nationalities. There are no politics. There are no religions. There are no races. There are no names. There is no time. There is only now, the eternal now. There is only life in the form of humanity, and we are bound to each other by our common needs and by our common desires, as if there is but one gigantic bloodstream coursing through all the lives on earth, pumping the force of life into all of us. One spirit, in dividing itself up, gave birth to all the souls that struggle in the universe. One spirit. And guess what? Our common humanity enables us to do amazing things, miraculous things. We can transcend our narrow preoccupations and provide those in need with food and shelter, support and encouragement, hope and love. Hate put me in prison, but love busted me out. Love cures all people, both those who give it and those who receive it. But that one virtue, love, could be made universal, the kings and queens, the presidents and dictators of the world would have no battlefields. The heads of families would attempt no usurpations. Men would commit no robberies. Rulers and ministers would be kind and filial. Brothers would be harmonious and easily reconciled. Humankind in general, loving one another, the strong would not prey upon the weak. The many would not plunder the few. The rich would not insult the poor. The noble would not be insolent to the mean, and the deceitful would not impose upon the simple. As you saw in this film, Your Excellencies, many different people reached out to help me. Men and women from different walks of life, from different countries, and from different backgrounds, both rich and poor, who came to support me in my time of need. And together, we defeated the forces of ignorance, the forces of hatred, and the forces of prejudice. I stand here before you tonight, Your Excellencies, as living proof that what unites us is far more powerful than what divides us. Assalamu alaikum and Godspeed. I guess the first was last and the last was first. I guess this is it. It's over. Oh, one thing before we go, please. I know it's been a long time, and I'm in the United Nations, and the hurricane's taking over again. Can't help it. There's one thing I wish to say. I wish to show everybody the failure of human beings. What has been our failure? 6 human beings trapped in happenstance, in the dark and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story's told. Their dying fire in need of logs, the first woman held hers back. For of all the faces around the fire, she noticed that one of them were black. The next man looking across the way saw not one member of his church and couldn't bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. The third man sat in tattered clothes. He gave his coat a hitch. Why should my piece of wood be used to warm the idle rich? The rich man just sat back and thought of all the wealth he had in store and how he can keep what he had earned from the lazy and shiftless poor. The black man's face bespoke of revenge as their fire faded from sight. For all he could see in his stick of wood was a chance to spite the whites. The last man in this forlorn group did naught except for gain, given only to those who gave is how he played the game. Their logs held tight in deaf, still hands was proof of human sin. They didn't die from the cold without. They died from the cold within. Thank you.